All right, I'm back. Looks like I spoke too soon, so the crowd kind of came out, you know, such as it is. But yeah, quite a bit more. And I still had more to say, damn it. Oh, I forgot to mention I'm huffing and puffing because I have my weighted vest on. These are 25 pounds. And I get in these laps in that are, I mean, they're definitely not a quarter mile each. These are probably approaching a half mile each. So I do like 4 of these with the weighted vest, and I really feel it. You can tell you're aging when, you know, I used to wear my weighted vest. So my ex bought this for me back in 2021, I think, summer 2021, and I use it in the spring and summertime, just walking around. Sometimes I remember this route I used to walk that was like 4 miles, and you'd feel it, but not as much as I feel it now. Like, I'll be sore, especially like in my lower back and through my hamstrings, glutes, all that, blah blah blah, until probably like Thursday, and no like injury or anything like that. And I'm walking, so it's low impact. I'm not running, but yeah, I'll just be hurting. So it's just a concession you got to make. Is that guy listening to like Tony Bennett or something? Some big band. But anyway, yeah. So I wanted to continue the thought. So I remember, I can't talk about this much because it was quite a crazy situation about 10 years ago involving extortion, but. Yes, extortion with a capital E. Not on my part, but someone else, a bad actor, who unfortunately recently passed. And I remember back when we were, I don't know, friendly is the right word, but, you know, I used to listen to his videos. I won't say who it was. I recognize this cat. He's out here fairly often training his little boy to catch pop flies and to hit a little bit. Living the dream. Baseball is a very technical game. But anyway, he said the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And he made that video. I don't think that's necessarily what the video was about. That was just one of his points. I mean, that's got to be like well over 10 years ago, probably like 15 years ago, almost into like early YouTube. And a bunch of his videos I have like saved on my old laptop. And then ever since then, I paid attention to that. Like, you know, the old saying, you know, once you see the door, all you can see is the door. And, you know, a lot of times that applies to relationships. Once the girl starts to balk or is unsatisfied with the relationship, basically it's a ticking time bomb. And whenever there's a situation where she can leave, she's probably going to look for it, and you got to talk her off the ledge, blah, 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 until eventually you run out of rebuttals, and then she's just gone or whatever. Ask me how I know. But yeah, so, and again, talking about my friend who, you know, I asked, do you love her? I remember sometime before, before he got married. So, I mean, this might ring a bell with some of you. A lot of women are like anti TVs in the bedroom, anti-man caves, anti a lot of things that would put the attention on something other than themselves, where, you know, the man will kind of, you know, figuratively like worship something else other than her or whatever, right? So my homie, he drove, let's just say, a very, very modest car. And it's funny too, because it ties into a previous situation with a girl that he's talking to before he met his wife, pretty much immediately, almost before he met his wife. And the reason why they broke up is because she was trying to like build a Negro. And then he realized that, and, like, you know, again, he's a meat and potatoes guy. He just kind of wants to live his simple life and not necessarily be pushed into something unless he wants to do it. And basically he drove a simple car, and she kind of, somehow she either kind of knew or he told her or whatever, like, you know, they were close enough, how much he made. And then she was like, well, why do you drive this car, you know, some Econo S-Box, instead of, you know, like a used 7 Series or a 5 Series or something like that, which is funny in and of itself, right? When you're talking about reliability and all that, we know that as much as I love BMWs, the cost of ownership isn't just purchasing the vehicle. But anyway, and he told me about like several conversations that they had where she was basically like, yeah, so why don't you, you know, you're like the head of this department. Why don't you like go for like a vice principal position or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then other things, kind of like attached to that or along those lines. And eventually they, it broke off. And I want to say more, but I won't. So anyway, leading up to his wife, he's the type of person that drives cars for like 5 years minimum, which for me, that's like the maximum. My RAV4 actually is coming up on 5 years in September. And my Accord sometime before I had for like 4+ years. It seems like I'm driving them longer and longer. Maybe I'm just maturing or something, or I'm keeping my cars longer or whatever. But, he had done over like a 12-year period, he had like a little Civic that was old when he got it. And then I found him let's just say, a mid-sized luxury car down in like Maryland, probably, I don't know, like 2012 or so. And then, unfortunately he got into an accident where it was total. So he was all set to buy, again, in keeping with this character, his quote unquote dream car, if you could see my air quotes. And all that was like a new, or at least certified, so like, close to new, Toyota 4Runner. That's all. Nothing crazy. When I tell you that was the first thing to come off the table as they got married, like, that's my word. And he was like one of those, like many of us, one of those like, never a minivan guy. And yeah, pretty much for the duration of their marriage, which has been, I won't date it, but let's just say it's been longer than 5 years. He's been driving a minivan. And you know what? He's just fine. Like every now and again, he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about maybe getting like a little, when the boys are a little bit older or whatever, getting like a little sports sedan or something like that or whatever. But he says it in this sheepish way where, it's like, this is what I'd like, but it's probably not going to happen. And I'm fine with that either way. So again, caveat, a lot of these people that I tell you about, they're kind of like those, happy wife, happy life type of guys, where I have that in me, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily, throwing my happiness in the gutter. I know, Kevin Samuels, if he were alive, he would not like to hear that, right? Life is not about happiness. And yeah, with my ex, as I said in the previous video, choke points, right? That was a significant choke point for us because I think you remember the video where I was at the Porsche dealership, not buying a brand new Porsche, right? I don't have $100,000 to spend on a new like 992 or anything like that, but they happen to have like a clean trade-in with like 50,000 miles, the perfect color too. It was like that seal gray blue type color, which is perfect, matching leather. I think you remember the video. I've since taken it down. Like it's there, but it's hidden so no one can see it, for obvious reasons. And it was the right price. It was like right at the beginning of the pandemic. So before the price on everything spiked, and I think they were asking like low 40s or whatever, which was somewhat high, but given how clean it was and everything, I was like, whatever, I'll take it. But then I started looking at my finances. It was going to be like not quite a car poor buy, but like, how you can be car poor or house poor, where like you can afford it, but then, you're eating ramen noodles or whatever, and like everything else is tight. It was very close to that. Not to mention my ex at the time, she just didn't like it. She felt like basically I put the car before her and we had other more important things. You can use your imagination there, coming up, blah, blah, blah. Of course, me being in the moment, you think you have a hold on something, but you really don't. And I figured, well, we're not going to break up over this, but, it became kind of like death by 1,000 paper cuts in a lot of ways. And, that just reminds me of how not meat and potatoes that I am. Maybe I need to be to a certain degree, or at least more compromising. But yeah, that was just a thought. I've got a bunch of other thoughts, but I already made like a 22-minute video, and this is already over 9 minutes. I think you get the idea. But again, the way you do anything is the way you do everything, and it's not a coincidence that. And I have a bunch of other stories about my friend that are along those lines, where fork in the road, choose left or right, and it's one direction every time. So very much, how you take those like Myers-Briggs tests. I'm like an INTJ, so which no surprise, quite rare and very hard to match up with that personality. But it's funny how I've taken it several times and gotten like the same thing. it's funny how like when you profile things the right way, you can clearly see what someone's like personality and character are. Anyway, the Lord is faithful. Stay with me. God bless.